Welcome to the Forge, my wanton wildlings. I'm your creepsmith, and I hope you like my work. If you do anything long enough, you'll become a name in that business. People will talk. When you're as big a name as Disney, people talk a lot. In this case, it's about the theme parks. I have no idea how true any of the rumors may be, but it does make for a fun little jaunt into the dark side. Tonight's classic Creep Fest, Working at Disney by Bleetch from Reddit No Sleep. The magical world of Disney. So much goes on off stage and behind the scenes to ensure that the guests have the most magical time of their lives once they arrive on the property. Have you ever seen a wet paint sign while walking through the parks? How about a maintenance cast member with a bag of tools? Anyone with a construction hard hat? Of course you haven't. That would ruin the experience that Walt Disney World is perfection. It's because of that 99.99% of all of the work goes on after the show is over. All the little mice that keep the place running like clockwork don't even start working until the announcement is made over the radios that the park is now clear. Then the crews get to work. Maintenance starts buzzing around on their golf carts. The custodial cast members bring out the large hoses to wash down every inch of the streets that we all walk on, and the construction crews are allowed past the security perimeter gates to come in and do whatever needs to be done that day. That's where my story begins. I've worked construction most of my life. When work dried up north, I moved to Florida, where some of my family had moved over 10 years ago. Naturally, I needed to find a job. I wound up applying for and getting hired by a construction company that shall remain nameless, that did literally almost all of the construction needs for the corporate mouse. I spent 5 or 6 overnights a week at various locations at Walt Disney World with coworkers. We weren't technically employed by Disney and hence weren't cast members, doing whatever our foreman told us needed to be done. Sweet gig, actually, even though it was very hard work at times. Just think, how many people can truly say that they get to ride around the Magic Kingdom, Animal Kingdom, etc. in the dead of night in trucks, golf carts, and what have you, while the park is just about empty, except for a skeleton crew? For about the first 6 months, I kinda kept to myself, except for talking with the crew of the company that I worked for. Then I began noticing how chummy many of the Disney overnight crew was with our staff. Custodians, when working in the same area as us, would come and talk to the boys as well as the overnight security cast members. I began to slowly get to know many of these folks as well. They, for the most part, were really nice. I got to know many of the night security staff, by face at least, at all 4 parks as well as the resorts. If you didn't know, Walt Disney World opened in 1971. It was actually not too uncommon to come across people who had been lifers with Disney or knew someone who was. 40 plus years working for the mouse. God bless him. Even my foreman, who although he didn't work directly for Walt Disney World, was one of these. Boy, did they have some stories to tell to pass the time. As I adjusted more to the job, I began to get more comfortable with the surroundings. The cast members grew more social towards me, and I was able to make my way through the parks without getting too lost. Let me tell you, that is not an easy feat when you first start out working there, especially at night. Although it's not pitch black, there is very minimal lighting, except where we put our floodlights up to do the work. Security is only using flashlights or the headlights of their carts to light their ways, and store lights are only on if someone's working in them. It's quite eerie, yet cool at the same time. It's like a totally different place than during operating hours. As a matter of fact, one time when I decided to visit the park as a guest, I couldn't find a ride that I wanted to go on because it looked so different during the day with all the colors and the people and the sounds and the music. One year working at this place full time, and I had to swallow my stupid pride and go get a map. Pathetic. Anyway, as I started conversing more and more with the cast members, some of the security staff and I found out that we had a mutual interest in the paranormal. Of course, that would come up in conversation eventually when working the graveyard shifts. I'd get to hear stories from them all the time. The famous ghost in the Pirates of the Caribbean ride, the murder-suicide in one of the rooms of a certain resort, the jumping off of terraces at another, ghosts of cast members who passed on that come back and say hi, the spooky occurrences at rides where some unfortunate guest was killed. The stories went on and on. Although fun to hear, I won't lie, it did give the whole property an ominous feel at times that a guest will never get to experience. Even co-workers of mine had stories to tell, attractions turning on even though the lockout-tagout system is in place to ensure that they don't, following someone into a break room and walking in to find no one there. Of course, the noises and voices when they were working alone. Oh, ghost hunters! Jackpot! So, several months ago, when I was arriving at work, the foreman called our team over for a meeting. He announced that we would be starting a new assignment in the Magic Kingdom shortly. We would be working on the Seven Dwarves Mine train ride. This attraction would be opening later in the year. It was exciting. Up until now, my crew, since I had started with them, had been doing mundane yet necessary repair assignments. We'd had the pleasure of pouring concrete, digging ditches, fixing bathrooms. It was good stuff. Now, we were actually going to get to work on an attraction. Imagine me getting to tell my future wife and children that I helped make this as we were riding it. They would be in awe, and they'd be so proud. Yeah. The building was already up for the most part, and we were going to be working on making it show ready. You know, making a building look like a mine inside and out. Fabricating rocks, fixating jewels, the works. When it came time to start this, he had us meet in one of the cast member break rooms inside the attraction. For those that don't know, most, if not all, attractions have break rooms inside them that the public can't see. A cast member working the ride literally doesn't have to leave it if he or she doesn't want to, even for a lunch break. He explained the job, who would be doing what each week, and all the normal details. Then he proceeded to tell us that, as per Disney management, we were all to take our lunch breaks at 3 a.m. and to only take it in this particular break room that we were in at the time. I thought that was kind of weird. Since my employment had begun with them, we were never told when and where to take lunch. We always used to stagger out our breaks as well, so that most of the crew was always working at some point. Whatever, I guess. The mouse paid our bills, and who the hell was I to question it? I was still the rookie, but I will say this. I saw what I was thinking in the eyes of my co-workers as well. We were a group of 10 guys on this assignment, and we were broken up into groups of 5. One group would work on the outside, one on the inside of the attraction. I was on the inside group. It was a pain to work in that thing. Due to the size of the spaces where we had to work, maybe 1 or 2 floodlights would fit in an area where we were working. It gave the effect of staring into a fire in the woods. While working on a wall, it was bright as hell. When you came out of that space, you were blind as a bat. The first few days, it became a running joke or contest of who tripped on something and broke their ass the most each week and had to pay for the drinks when we went out together. I paid up twice that first month. Thanks, Disney. Now, I guess you could call me paranoid, But I would never leave my lunch bag in the fridge in the break room. I'm an absolute angry asshole if I get hangry, and after having it stolen once while at the Animal Kingdom, I was not going to have it happen again. So I just carried it with my other gear from then on. We were working in the opposite side of the attraction from the break room, and it was just about lunchtime. We cleaned up all the possible trip hazards and then went on break. When we got to the break room, I realized that I had left my bag where we were working. Damn it. There was no way I was spending $8 on a Coke and a stupid bear claw from one of Disney's rip-off vending machines. I told the guys that I was going to run back and get my bag, and off I went. I was hurrying along because we only get a half hour for lunch, and if we take even a minute longer to get back to our work location, there is hell to pay. And you all know how fast a half hour flies by unless you're actually working. Trying to make good time, I must have made a wrong turn in all that blackness. My stupid flashlight was in my tool bag, of course. I was attempting to feel my way around the track when I saw some light coming from up ahead of me. They looked like they could have been a set of emergency lights, but they were very dim and flickering. Who cares? Any port in a storm, right? I slowly made my way towards them and began to hear voices, but I couldn't make out any words. There was no one in the attraction other than us, or so we were told. Oh my God. After all the stories that I'd been told, was I going to finally have one of my own? As much as I felt the hairs on my neck stand up, I was really excited as well. Even though I really like hearing about ghosts, I can't say that I am truly afraid of them. I just don't want them in my home. Other than that, I find the idea of them fascinating. I slowly peeked my head around the next corner, and I wish to God it was a ghost that I'd seen. It was a large, at least compared to where we were working, open space, and there was a fabricated stone slab made to look like a natural rock formation in the center. 6 figures in suits were around it in a circle. 5 were holding candles, and 1 was reading off what looked like an old piece of parchment. What he was saying was beyond anything I knew, not English from what I could hear. Every time the main suit would finish a sentence or two, the others would repeat the last word. As I crouched there, amazed, I saw what looked like a flash of yellow and blue stirring from on top of the altar, I guess. There was someone on it. A woman. She stirred again, and I thought my eyes were playing tricks on me. It looked like one of those college program kids that get to be friends with the characters, completely dressed as Snow White. She was gagged and bound. What the hell was I seeing? Her eyes were huge and filled with fright. Tears were streaming down her face, making her overly done makeup run. And as much as she was struggling, she could barely move. The man with the parchment stopped reading, and the others all produced some crudely made daggers and made their way to her. 2 of them went to each of her arms, 2 to her legs, and 1 stood at the top of her head. The leader, for lack of a better word, made a gesture with his hands and said one more uncomprehensible word as the others moved in. The 2 by her arms sliced them from mid-bicep down to the wrists. The others did the same from mid-thigh to the tops of her feet. And the 5th one actually carved what looked like a half moon into her forehead. I stifled a scream and closed my eyes. I could hear muffled screams and smell copper in my nostrils and taste it in the back of my throat. I opened my eyes briefly to see the leader produce a knife and walk over to the altar and lift poor Snow White's chin up toward him. That's when I turned and ran. I got back to the break room, sprinting through the door. I must have looked half crazed because one of my buddies said, "What the hell happened to you? Where's your lunch bag?" I didn't even answer him. I just stood there, He looked me over one more time and then decided to call the foreman over the radio to come and talk with me. The foreman came in, took one look at me, and asked if I was feeling okay. I shook my head. He told me to go home for the remainder of the shift. I called out sick for the next 3 days. In the comfort of my home, I attempted to rationalize what had happened. Had to be a gag, right? Was it my boys with an elaborate welcome to the crew trick? I mean, my God, Walt Disney World is crammed full of college program kids, late teens and early 20-year-olds away from home and college for the first time, getting paid crap just so they can put Disney on their resumes. Just fornicating and causing havoc every chance they get, right? Playing tricks so they can put it on their blogs or Twitter or whatever other stupid things they use to get the attention. Had to be, right? On my first night back to work, I literally had to force myself not to turn my car around at the security gate when the guard opened it for me to enter. When I got to the break room, one of the lifers that I'd worked with was sitting there seemingly waiting for me. He told me to clock in, leave my stuff with him, and go meet the foreman over by the main entrance. I looked at him quizzically since the entrance was pretty far from where the mine was, and it was heavily frowned upon for non-cast members to be found wandering so far from where we were assigned. I started to ask as such, and he just said, "Go. You'll be with your boss, so it would be his ass and not yours if someone says something." I made my way over to the main entrance and found him under the train station, sitting on one of the benches. He told me to sit. And we sat there for about 5 minutes without speaking, and he lit up a cigarette. I did as well. During night shift, you could get away with this if you were careful about it. He asked me what had happened to me the other night. I just shrugged, looked at the newly hosed down ground, and exhaled. He put his hand on my shoulder and said that I was a great coworker. The other guys all liked me a lot. He didn't want to lose me, and he was surprised that I'd come back after the way I'd looked. I told him that that wasn't far from the truth. He asked me if I was just sick or if something had happened. He also asked me if maybe a cast member or manager had given me a hard time. If so, he'd handle it. I shook my head and said that he wouldn't believe me and he would probably fire me for being a nut if I told him. He then said something that made me feel it was okay to tell my story. He said, "I've been working here since it was just flat land and dirt roads. Nothing you say can shock me." I looked at him, dead in the eyes. When I saw he was telling the truth, I began to explain everything from the beginning. I ended the story when the other guy told me to come and see him. My foreman sat there, flicked his cigarette butt, and ground it into a floor. This is a huge Disney no-no. He'd sat there nodding through the entire story, not interrupting once. Never a smirk, never a smile, or a look of disbelief. A custodial truck happened to drive by, and when the headlights flashed on us, I'd seen that all the blood had seemed to drain away from my foreman's face. He breathed in and exhaled once from the mouth. He had the beginnings of tears in his eyes, and then he finally spoke. "What I'm about to tell you, kiddo, not many here have been here long enough to know. And those that do know almost never speak about it. It's sort of a taboo subject, and the few that do talk about it are too old to care or have had one too many scotches." He smiled half-heartedly at this, and I thought maybe he might stop, but he continued. "I have lived in this area for almost 80 years. I've barely been out of this state, less times than I can count on one hand. Orlando has only looked this way for a very short time. If you could have seen this land in the time I grew up here, you'd be amazed. Marshland and orange groves. Nothing else. until Uncle Walt decided that this was the spot for his next incredible theme park, there was practically nothing. Humans have been inhabiting this land for a very long time. The ice, the Appalachie, the Calusa, the Timucua, the Tocobago, all native Indians that lived in or around the land that you're sitting on right now. The Paleo Indians were here before them. See, these are ancient lands. Well, I'm no historian, but I guess them Indians at some point figured out that this land was a little spoiled. Spoiled as in not just bad, but spoiled as in how a little child throws a tantrum if it doesn't get its way. At some point, when these cultures were not having good weather or crops or what have you, they figured out that a blood sacrifice would do the trick. Every time they built a large structure in this area, they drew blood. But for whatever reason, the sacrifice had to do with what was being built. For example, if the Indians were building a religious structure, a shaman had to be sacrificed. If a settler was building a barn or an orange grove, a farmhand had to be the one. You get me? And it had to be done by the elders of the town. Couldn't be done by just anyone, but the most influential people in the area. You ever see that movie Pet Sematary by Stephen King? It's like that, but more important people are involved. Do you know the story about Disney buying this land? He bought it not under the Disney brand, but through hundreds of pseudo companies. He didn't want anyone to know that he was going to build a theme park here because the locals might not sell as cheaply as they did. So he did what he did. And I wonder if through all of this half-truth bargaining, if him or his round table of executives ever wondered why so many people were willing to sell at such low prices. Were they done having to do the despicable to make a profit here? Did any of them want out? It can really make you wonder. And how come, supposedly, no one ever dies at Disney? How come all the people are proclaimed dead off of the property? And why do we hire so many college kids that are supposedly running rampant here? Think about it. I gotta tell you, because I think you may deserve it after you've seen what you claim to have seen. The powers at be here are powerful. More powerful than just being Disney executives. They pretty much rule everything. You think Club 33 is exclusive? He laughed, but with no humor. The club that you stumbled on rules more than just a theme park. If you talk about what you've seen, your life may be in danger. I just sat there trying to soak in what I'd just heard. This was insane. And then my foreman said one more thing before the last sentence I ever said to that nice man. If you think that was bad, just imagine what I heard as we were building It's a Small World. I swear I still hear kids screaming once I close my eyes at night, 40 years on. My reply? I quit. Yeah, magical world of Disney. I still get the shakes when I think about it. I hate every fucking Disney commercial that comes on TV, and they come on a lot. I get goosebumps every time. I see that Universal's hiring. I need work. Should I apply? Do anything long enough, or well enough, and you'll run into the phrase, greatness demands sacrifice. You might want to consider whether they mean that literally. Stay scary, my wildlings. Remember to take your lunch when you're going to lunch, and make the most of your nights.